Chains of Flesh and Flame. The Trials of Heracles. Chapter 1. Blood for Redemption. There was a time before the blood, before the madness, before the gods demanded everything. In that time, Heracles was just a man, born of Alcmen, made monstrous by Zeus, tolerated by Olympus, and feared by mortals who caught the steel in his voice and the weight in his step. He laughed then. He loved. That ended with the flies of madness. It began with whispers in his sleep. Hera's curse, subtle and seething. Heracles dreamed of serpents in cribs and found himself waking to the screams of his sons. A wife's blood on his hands. A cradle smashed like pottery. No memory. No mercy. The world didn't care for explanations. The hero had become a butcher. He walked into the woods, alone, blade at his throat, ready to end the tale. But the gods weren't done with him. Apollo's oracle found him first, in Delphi, burning like a fever dream. "Go to Tiryns," she said. "Place your strength in the hands of the coward king. Let your flesh be broken. Let your name be bled clean." Tiryns was stone, walls too tall for the wind to touch. Inside its belly sat King Eurystheus, a man with the soul of a rat and the smile of a vulture. He wore his fear like perfume and spoke through trembling lips. "You will serve," he said, voice tight. 12 labors. If you survive, the gods will lift your curse. If you fail, they'll forget you. He said it with a smug curl, thinking Heracles would protest. But Heracles just knelt. "I am already forgotten." The first night, they gave him no bed. He slept on stone with the dogs. The guards whispered about him, murderer, madman, spawn of thunder. He didn't speak. His dreams were too loud. His wife's voice, the drip of blood on baby skin, the roar that split his soul in half. He wept without tears. The forge was being lit inside him. The next morning, Eurystheus stood atop his marble throne and read from a scroll with exaggerated flair. "First," he said, "you will slay the Nemean lion. Its skin is invulnerable to blades. No spear, no arrow, no axe will pierce it." Heracles looked up, just once. Eurystheus expected fear. Instead, he saw a man already halfway to death and walking forward. As Heracles turned to leave, Eurystheus called after him. "Oh, and Heracles," the hero paused. "Don't die too quickly. I'd rather enjoy the long decline." Heracles said nothing, but in his mind he struck the king dead 100 ways. He would earn his redemption in blood and pain. 12 trials. One name. He would wrench godhood from the hands of those who spat him out like a defect. Not for Olympus, not even for himself. For the ghosts of the innocent, the ones he failed. Chapter 2. The Lion of Nemea. The Nemean valley didn't breathe. The trees there stood like petrified witnesses, their bark charred, their leaves long since burned to ash. Villages on the edge of the forest had gone silent. No birds, no dogs, no children laughing in the olive groves. Only bones remained, picked clean, scattered in trails that led back to the cave at the valley's heart. The lion's den. Not a lion exactly. Something older. Something divine, born from the twisted hate of Typhon and Echidna, shaped not by nature but by divine spite. Its hide could not be pierced by iron, bronze, or fire. Its breath smelled of rot and war. And in its eyes, flame, unnatural and patient. Heracles walked into the valley barefoot. No armor, no sword, just a bow across his back and a club carved from olive wood, its head bound in iron, its shaft wrapped in blood-stained cloth. The air felt wrong here, thicker, heavier, like the world didn't want him there. He tracked it for a day, then another. It circled him, watched him from the brush, mocked him with half-eaten carcasses left where he'd sleep. The lion did not fear. It understood what Heracles was, and it wanted to see him break. On the third night, he found the cave. The entrance was gnarled and blackened, littered with cracked skulls and bones gnawed through like soft bread. Heracles lit a torch and stepped inside. The heat hit him first, wet and rancid. The second thing was the sound, a growl so low it vibrated his ribs. Then the eyes, two burning coals reflecting his fire back at him. The lion was already awake. It lunged. Heracles rolled left. Its claws scraped the wall, cutting stone like butter. He struck with the torch. It hissed, not in pain, but amusement. Flames rolled off its fur like rain. Heracles drew his bow, knocked an arrow, and let it fly. Clang. It bounced. The second arrow broke in half. The lion leapt again, jaws wide. Heracles dropped the bow and caught its front leg mid-air. Its momentum sent them both crashing to the ground. Dust and bones exploded outward. He screamed, not in pain, in rage, as he punched it in the throat, once, twice, 10 times. Nothing. The beast rolled him. Its fangs scraped his shoulder. Blood flowed. He grappled it, limbs locked in a primal war. His club gone, bow shattered, arrows useless. Only hands now. The lion snapped. Heracles shoved his forearm into its maw, felt teeth graze bone. With the other hand, he reached, found a shard of rib bone in the dirt, stabbed it into the lion's eye. It roared, and for the first time, it bled. He used the opening, slammed the beast's head into the cave wall, over and over. His fingers found its throat. He gripped tight. The cave filled with the sound of choking and bone grind. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Then, silence. Heracles stood, blood-drenched, gasping. The lion was dead, but his arms were torn, his side shredded, his bow destroyed, and the corpse before him could not be skinned. Not by blade, not by fire. So he did it the only way he could. With the lion's own claw, he peeled the hide from its corpse. He wrapped it around himself. A cloak of defiance. A mantle not given, but earned. The next morning, he returned to Tiryns. Eurystheus took one look at him, blood-slicked, eyes hollow, a lion's face draped over his shoulder, and fled to hide in a bronze jar, buried in the palace courtyard. He would speak through messengers from then on. But Heracles had no need of words. One labor down. 11 to go. Chapter 3. The Hydra of Lunar. The swamps of Lunar stank of rot and silence. No birds, no frogs. Even the insects refused to hum. Heracles stood at the edge, boots sinking into the mud. The reeds hissed like snakes. Black water rippled with unseen movement. Overhead, the sky sagged with stormlight, thick and breathless. The Hydra lived here, a creature of Hera's own breeding, born of chaos, fed on fear. 9 heads, some said. Others claimed more. All venomous, all regenerating. Cut one down, 2 more rose. Its breath could blacken trees. Its blood could kill gods. This wasn't a beast. It was a punishment wearing scales. Heracles didn't speak as he entered the swamp. He gritted his teeth and wrapped his lion skin cloak tighter across his shoulders. He carried a sword on his back, a torch in one hand, and the weight of the first kill still thick in his bones. He wasn't alone. At his side walked Iolaus, his nephew, young, loyal, clever, not a fighter, but smart enough to carry oil and fire. "You don't have to come," Heracles muttered. Iolaus shrugged. "Someone needs to burn the stumps." Heracles allowed a faint, grim smile. The boy understood. They tracked it by the stench, sulphur and rotting meat, bones half sunk in the water, a stag twisted in death, its ribs melted like wax. Then ripples, then bubbles, then silence. Then the heads rose. Not 9, not 10, 12. Eyes glowing, teeth serrated. The central head was larger, wider, plated in bone. It screamed, and the air shattered. Heracles didn't hesitate. He threw the torch, blade already drawn. He charged. The first head lunged. He ducked, slashed, severed it mid-neck. Blood hit the swamp with a hiss. It boiled the water into steam. But even as it fell, 2 heads burst from the stump. They screamed louder. Iolaus gasped. "They grow back!" "I know." Heracles fought like a storm. Blade flashing, cloak dragging through muck, eyes wild with fury. He cut down 1, then 2, but they kept multiplying. Fangs tore into his shoulder. Another raked his thigh. He dropped the sword, grabbed a fallen branch, and swung wildly. "Fire!" he shouted. "The stumps! Burn them!" Iolaus moved fast, drenched the soil in oil, lit it with his torch. As Heracles fought, Iolaus followed, torch pressed to each writhing neck, burning the wounds shut. The smell was unbearable. Burnt meat and bile, holy venom cooking in the air. Head by head, they turned the tide. But the central one, the Alpha, watched. It didn't strike. It waited. When only it remained, it hissed a laugh. Then it spoke, not with words, but thought. A voice slithering through Heracles' skull. "You cannot kill what is born of your sins. You strike and it returns, like your memories, like the blood on your hands. You think this is labor. This is reflection." Heracles snarled. He grabbed the central neck with both hands, ignored the venom sizzling his arms. He ripped it from the body. Iolaus was already there, pouring oil. Flames rose orange and black until the swamp itself glowed with infernal light. The Hydra screamed, and then nothing. Ash, steam, bones. Only Heracles remained, soaked in blood not his own. He dropped to his knees, fists clenched in the mud. Later, they carried the Hydra's corpse back, just the central head, wrapped in cloth. Its blood still dripped. It would burn any man to touch it. It would kill a god. Heracles kept it, not as a trophy, as a reminder that strength without strategy is just violence. That monsters don't die unless you understand how they live. And that some heads, like memories, grow back unless you burn the roots. Chapter 4. The Hind of Serenea. There are beasts that demand battle, and there are beasts that demand respect. The Serenaean hind was the second kind, a creature of divinity, beloved by Artemis, golden-horned, hooves like polished obsidian, faster than arrows and silent as falling snow. It lived in the groves of Chaeronea, far from men, untouched by war. To harm it was to invoke the wrath of the goddess of the hunt. And yet, Eurystheus had ordered it captured, not slain, taken alive. The king's smug satisfaction came not from the difficulty but from the paradox. Heracles could kill, he could bleed monsters and crack bones. But restraint, that was the real test. The journey north was long and cold. Forests bent low with mist. The ground whispered beneath his feet. Heracles wore his lion skin cloak, but left his weapons behind. A sword was no use here, only silence, only patience. He hunted for a year. Seasons passed, leaves goldened and died, rivers froze and thawed. He saw it once, its flank glowing in twilight. He gave chase. It vanished into fog. Another month passed before he glimpsed it again. By the third sighting, he understood. You don't catch the hind by force. You wait. You earn its gaze. He stopped chasing. He began to follow, from a distance, through whispering woods and sacred streams. He left offerings at Artemis's altars. He mended broken trees where his presence had scarred the grove. And slowly, The hind allowed him closer. On the final day, it stood across the river, golden horns gleaming in dawnlight. It did not flee. Heracles crossed the water on bare feet, slow and reverent. When he laid his hands upon it, it did not buck. It only blinked. He bound it in soft cloth and vines, made a yoke of leather, and led it gently through the woods. No chains, no cage. But before he could leave Cereneus' borders, the sky cracked. Artemis appeared. She stepped from moonlight, her bow already drawn. "You dare touch what is mine," she said, voice calm, but thunder rode behind it. Heracles bowed. "I was tasked, not by choice. Do not lie to a goddess. I sought only to prove I could do more than kill." Her eyes searched him like knives. Then she lowered her bow. "You have shown restraint, but I will not allow you to keep it." Heracles nodded. "Let me present it, then I will return it to your woods." Artemis studied him a moment longer, then vanished. Heracles returned to Tiryns with the hind. Eurystheus reached to seize it, but Heracles did not release the reins. "The goddess demands it be returned. I am the king. You are not a god." And for a moment, just a flicker, Eurystheus saw what it meant to stare down unmoving mercy. Not fire, not rage, but a calm will sharpened into iron. He backed down. Heracles released the hind. It vanished into the trees. 3 labours down, 9 to go. But this one didn't end with blood. It ended with self-control, the kind forged not by war, but by choice. And even the gods watched him now, closer than ever. Chapter 5. The Boar of Erymanthos. The Erymanthian mountains were carved from winter's breath. Snow swallowed sound, trees grew sideways from the wind. Wolves kept their distance, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Because something older roamed there, something monstrous, not divine, not cursed, just perfectly brutal. The Erymanthian boar was no sacred symbol. It was a beast of muscle and wrath, tusks longer than a man's forearm, eyes like cold iron. It didn't kill to feed. It killed because it could. A hurricane on hooves. Heracles was told to bring it back alive. No spear, no blade, no mercy. He ascended the mountain in dead winter. Cold bit through lion skin and flesh. Wolves circled. A blizzard loomed. No gods answered his prayers. This was not a divine test. This was man versus rage. In a village at the foothills, an old woman stopped him. "You go to die," she said. "The last hunter it gored was found with his ribs inside out." Heracles looked her in the eyes. "Then I'll come back wearing them." He tracked the beast by ruin. Shredded trees, blood-stained snow, a frozen stag split in two. And then, at dusk, a roar that cracked the mountain's throat. It came charging from a ravine, steam pouring from its nostrils, snow exploding under its hooves. Heracles held his stance. The ground trembled. He dove to the side. The boar slammed into stone, shattering granite. He struck with a tree branch. It snapped in half against its hide. This wouldn't be a hunt. This would be a war of attrition. Days passed. Heracles stalked the beast through white-out winds and bloodied trails. He baited it with traps, lured it into pits. It escaped each one. He tried to break its legs with fallen logs. He tried to wear it down with cold. He tried to outlast it. But the boar never tired. By the 5th day, Heracles was bleeding from a gash in his thigh, frostbitten at the fingertips, and running out of will. He collapsed near a frozen stream, vision dimming. But as sleep came, he heard it, snorting. Closer. The boar had followed him. It stood across the clearing, breath fogging, flanks heaving, not charging, watching, almost like it understood. Heracles rose, limping, dropped his club. "Come then," he rasped. "Let's end it." And as if hearing the challenge in his bones, the boar lunged. He waited, not moving, until the last second. Then he sidestepped, leapt onto its back, and wrapped his arms around its throat. The snow exploded around them. It bucked, slammed into trees, spun in madness. Heracles held on, through broken ribs, through torn muscle, through hours of thrashing, until finally it fell, not dead, but heaving, rage drained. He bound its legs with stripped bark, tied it to a makeshift sled, and dragged it back down the mountain step by brutal step. When he reached Tiryns, blood-caked and blue-lipped, the gods screamed and fled. Eurystheus again hid in his bronze jar, too cowardly to face what Heracles had become. The beast was chained in the courtyard, still breathing, still wild. Heracles stood over it, fists clenched. He didn't smile. He didn't rest. He just watched the snow melt in its breath and nodded. Another labor done. But something had changed. This wasn't a man anymore. This was a storm with a spine. Chapter 6. The Stables of Augeas. The gods had laughed when they heard it. Not because it was funny, because it was cruel. Augeas, king of Elis, had a stable full of sacred cattle, divine beasts, blessed by Helios himself. But the stables hadn't been cleaned in 30 years. Filth rose to the rafters. Rivers of rot and dung ran beneath the floorboards. The smell could knock a vulture out of the sky. Eurystheus ordered Heracles to clean it, not as a task, as a humiliation. When Heracles arrived in Elis, the stench hit him like a fist. His lion skin cloak did nothing. His stomach turned. The ground near the stables oozed. Flies moved in clouds thick enough to block the sun. Augeas greeted him with a smirk, lounging on a throne of polished marble. "Ah, the son of Zeus, come to shovel my filth." Heracles said nothing, but his fists clenched. The king leaned closer. "Clean it all, in one day, without magic, or I tell Eurystheus you failed." A trap. Heracles knew it. But he nodded. He walked the perimeter in silence, measured the weight of 30 years of divine manure. The sacred cows watched him with golden eyes. Flies bit his skin. His boots sank to the ankles. This wasn't labor. This was a message. Even now, they thought they could break him. He took a deep breath, regretted instantly, then set to work. But Heracles didn't touch a shovel. Instead, he went to the two rivers that ran beside the palace, Orpheus and Peneus. He drove his fists into the earth, carved trenches with his bare hands, and redirected the rivers themselves. The water roared through the stables, tearing through decades of filth in minutes. Dung dissolved, walls cracked, sacred cattle scattered in shock. The stench vanished under the force of a flood. By sundown, the stables gleamed. Heracles stood in the wreckage, soaked, pleading, silent. But Augeas was not a king. He was a worm in robes. He refused to honor the agreement, refused to pay Heracles, claimed it had been a trick. He laughed before his court. "You're strong," he said, "but not clever. No reward for cheaters." Heracles did not strike him. He left, but his eyes said everything. Years later, Heracles would return. He would tear down the palace. He would slaughter the king and burn the throne to cinders. But not yet. For now, he returned to Tiryns, caked in dried river mud and fury. Eurystheus declared the labor invalid, claimed Heracles had used help. Another insult, another twist of the knife. Heracles didn't respond. He only stared. And though the king hid behind his bronze jar, he felt the weight of that silence. He felt the crack forming beneath the marble of his rule. Chapter 7. The Stymphalian Birds. The marsh of Stymphalos hummed with menace, not from insects, not from frogs, but from blades, faint metallic sounds that rang like 1,000 knives, unsheathed in the wind. The birds were already watching. They weren't animals. They were weapons, crafted by Ares in some long-forgotten war, beaks of bronze, feathers like razors, eyes like burning coals. Heracles stepped into the mire, and the air moved. They screamed. Arrows were useless. Their wings deflected steel. Every time he took aim, they vanished into the clouds. The marsh sucked at his feet, and above they circled, waiting. Then they dove, 3 at once. He rolled aside, felt a feather slice his cheek. Blood hit the water. He didn't grunt. He smiled. He couldn't outshoot them, couldn't outrun them, but he didn't need to. He reached into his satchel and pulled out the gift Athena had left him. Crotala, bronze clappers forged by Hephaestus himself. He slammed them together. The sound shattered the marsh. The birds screamed. They dropped from the sky in chaos, wings spasming. Heracles was already moving. Club in hand, he swung with fury. Crushed one, crippled another. He moved like war-given shape, methodical, brutal, exact. By sundown, the waters were red. The survivors fled east into exile. Eurydice called it a minor triumph, claimed the birds were barely beasts. But Heracles didn't answer. He only left the broken feathers on the palace steps. They were still wet. Chapter 8. The Cretan Bull. Crete was burning when he arrived. The bull had razed 3 villages already. It was not sacred, not blessed. It was madness made flesh, a gift from Poseidon twisted by arrogance. Its breath steamed like geysers. Its hooves shattered stone, and its eyes held no soul, only endless motion. It could not be reasoned with, could not be worn down. It moved like a storm on legs. Heracles didn't try to outpace it. He waited in its path. When it charged, he didn't dodge. He met it head on. He grabbed its horns, drove his heels into the earth, and held. Bones cracked. Its. But he held. They fell together, crashing into a ridge. It bucked, kicked, screamed. He gripped tighter. The bull collapsed beneath him, not slain, but spent. He wrapped it in chains and dragged it back, not for pride, for proof. Eurydice tried to hide his awe, ordered the bull released out of fear it might go mad again. Heracles didn't care. He had learned one thing from the beast. Sometimes the only path is through. Chapter 9. The Mares of Diomedes. Thrace reeked of rotting meat. The mares were not horses. They were cannibals, sacred to the warlord Diomedes, who fed them the flesh of prisoners. Their eyes were wild, their teeth blood-stained. They didn't fear man, they only hungered. Heracles fought through the guards with bare fists, stormed the stables and opened the gates. They charged him. He didn't flinch. He grabbed one by the neck, slammed it into the stable wall, broke another's jaw with his knee. They swarmed him, bit him, bled him. He endured. Then he did the unthinkable. He took Diomedes himself, still alive, and threw him to the horses. They fed. And when they were done, they were calm, horrified, maybe effective, completely. The mares were bound and delivered without resistance. Chapter 10. The Girdle of Hippolyta. The Amazons were warriors, not beasts, and Hippolyta was their queen, wise, strong, proud. Heracles was told to take her girdle, a symbol of her divine rule. He came with respect. She welcomed him. They spoke like equals, warriors. She offered the girdle in peace, but Hera would not allow it. She disguised herself as an Amazon, spread lies of betrayal. War erupted. Heracles fought, not with joy, but with grief. He killed warriors who didn't deserve to die. Hippolyta tried to calm the chaos. An arrow struck her in the back. She fell into Heracles' arms, her eyes wide with shock. He took the girdle, but not in triumph. This was no victory. Only another weight added to his soul. Chapter 11. The Cattle of Geryon. To the edge of the world. Erythea, where the giant Geryon ruled, 3 bodies, 1 will armed in crimson bronze. He had Orpheus, a 2-headed hound, and a herdsman with eyes that bled fire. Heracles arrived with nothing but his bow. He killed Orpheus with a single arrow. The herdsman fell next. Geryon came with thunder. The battle shattered cliffs. The sky wept flame. In the end, Heracles drew his bow, dipped an arrow in Hydra's blood, and fired. It pierced all 3 hearts. Geryon died, cursing the sky. The cattle were driven home, not a single one lost, not a single tear shed. Chapter 12. The Apples of the Hesperides. The apples were guarded by 3 things. The Hesperides, daughters of the evening. A serpent coiled around the tree, and Atlas, holding up the heavens. Heracles found Atlas first, asked him to fetch the apples. "I will," said the Titan, "but only if you hold this." Heracles took the sky. Weight unimaginable. Time melted. Atlas returned with the apples, smiled, and said, "I'll deliver them myself." Heracles smiled back. "Take the sky again, just for a moment, while I adjust my cloak." Atlas agreed. Heracles stepped away, took the apples, left the Titan screaming. Chapter 13. The Fire at Olympus. His last labour, to descend into Tartarus and bring up Cerberus, the Hound of the Dead. He went alone. No light, no blade, only will. He found Hades. "I ask for your beast." "You may take him," Hades said, "if you take him as he is. No chains, no weapons, just strength." Cerberus lunged. Heracles caught 2 heads by the neck, drove his knee into the 3rd. Blood ran, flesh tore. He held on until the beast broke. It followed him out. The dead watched in silence. When he returned, Eurystheus screamed. The labours were complete. The gods whispered. Zeus descended, lit the pyre himself. Heracles burned, but the flames did not consume him. They revealed him. His scars turned to light, his bones to golden marrow. He rose, no longer mortal, no longer burdened, only eternal. Heart of the Forge. The Ascension of Hephaestus. Chapter 1. The God beneath the mountain. The first thing Hephaestus remembered was the fall. A screaming wind, the crack of ribs, sky to stone. They called him a god, but he hit the earth like a thing no god would dare claim, spat out by Hera herself, queen of Olympus, who couldn't bear to look at her malformed child. No funeral rites, no cradle, just sky silence and ash. His body broke, but not his will. Buried deep beneath the crust of the world, in the belly of a long-dead fire serpent, he awoke. Bones fused wrong, one leg crooked, one hand twisted. But his eyes, those burned, not with light, but hunger. The cavern he landed in pulsed with dying heat. Ancient bones littered the floor. God-killers, shattered relics, rusted anvils from before even Cronus' rule. Here, under the skin of the world, the forgotten things gathered. And so did he. Years passed, maybe centuries. Time didn't tick here, it bled. He built. With no fire granted by Olympus, he invented his own. The spark screen. A flame born from friction and rage, coaxed from stone and spit. He struck bone against iron until the forge obeyed. He made tools from discarded teeth, armor from the exoskeletons of divine locusts, hammers from meteor hearts. Every blow he dealt to the anvil echoed up through the veins of the mountain. The earth itself knew his name. But the flame? It remained fickle, weak, tamed by one above. Helios, the sun-chained tyrant, the divine furnace master, the one who held dominion over every celestial spark. No god, mortal or beast, could light a forge without his consent. And Hephaestus had never asked. So the sun god sent warnings. First, a drought that dried the caves to cracking. Then, fire leeches that crawled through the vents, sucking heat from his coals. And finally, a message carved into the molten wall. You are not the fire. You are not the flame. You are the scrap. Stay buried. H. Hephaestus spat blood onto the words. Then, with teeth bared, he drove his hammer through them. If Helios wanted obedience, he'd have to come take it. The forge was no longer a place. It was a being, alive, fused with Hephaestus' flesh. He carved runes into his bones, threading sigils through the veins of his arm. He whispered to iron, taught it to bite. His leg, too damaged to bear his weight, was replaced with a mechanical brace forged from leviathan scale and obsidian pistons. Every step hissed steam and defiance. And then came the day he forged Anvil Heart. A weapon. Number A promise. Hammerhead of inverted star metal. Handle wrapped in the sinew of a martyr god. A tool built to not just shape, but destroy divinity. When he struck it for the first time, Olympus felt it. Plates shattered, mountain tops cracked, and Helios turned his burning gaze downward. It was time to rise. Chapter 2. Chains of the Sun. Tyrant. Hephaestus climbed the old way, the vent spires, jagged columns of slag and storm, each one a discarded ladder from the gods' war with the Titans. Every handhold bled, every breath tasted of sulphur and old oaths. But upward he went. The world above had changed. Olympus no longer floated in gleaming serenity. It pulsed with ruin. Palaces of pearl sat cracked, golden fountains ran dry. And at the center of it all, like a blistering wound in the sky, hung the solar crucible, Helios' forge fortress, suspended on chains of fire, turning endlessly with the weight of celestial ambition. Hephaestus saw it from a mountaintop, burning like judgment. As he approached the gates of Olympus, the first of the flame guardians met him. They weren't gods, not anymore. Helios had hollowed them, filled their veins with napalm, seared their memories away. Their eyes were coals, their mouths furnaces. They came with blades of light and armor that screamed when struck. Hephaestus didn't stop. He met them head on, hammer first. Clang. One's chest caved in like soft tin. Clang. Another's flame extinguished with a gout of bone smoke. Clang. Sparks flew like dying stars. Each kill fed his forge, his fury. He screamed his name into the clouds, and the mountain shook to hear it. Then came the voice. It didn't echo. It radiated through flesh, marrow, sky. Little godling, come to steal my flame. Helios. His words were sunlight and contempt. Hephaestus raised Anvil Heart. I came to take what was never yours. Alar, vast, solar, cruel. You'll die like the first fire, weak, ash-choked, forgotten. Hephaestus struck the gates. They burst open, molten hinges screaming. He stepped into the crucible. Chapter 3. Into the Crucible. The solar crucible was not a place. It was a machine made from torment, a vast, rotating core of solar glass, chained in the air by burning braids of star metal. Inside, the walls moved like gears, plates grinding against one another, each scream of friction echoing with divine agony. Rivers of molten gold flowed upward. Choirs of the sun's former priests, skin peeled and eyes sewn with flame thread, sang as their flesh crackled. It was hell wearing a crown of light. Hephaestus walked through it without flinching. His skin blistered. His mechanical leg hissed with strain. The hammer on his back glowed hotter than war, but his stride never broke. The deeper he went, the louder Helios's voice became. Not just from above, it came from the walls, from the light itself. You don't understand flame, cripple son. Fire is not for the broken. It cleanses, it purifies, it burns the wrong away. The light pressed down like fists. Gravity buckled. Hephaestus dropped to one knee. His hands trembled, not from pain but from memory. Hera's face, the cold eyes, the push from Olympus, the wind, the scream, the crack of spine on stone. He tasted bile, but then he felt the hammer's weight again. Anvil heart. It pulsed, not with heat, but with rhythm, like a forge waiting for the first strike. He stood. Then burn me, he growled, and the light obeyed. Helios descended, not as a man, but as a solar titan, 10 stories tall, made of fused armor and flame, crowned with rings of eclipsed light. His face was a furnace with no mercy. In each hand, a whip of daylight, cracking against the air with the sound of creation. You are the wrong, Helios roared, and I am the flame that corrects. He struck. Hephaestus rolled, the whip lashing stone behind him into magma. He came up swinging. Anvil heart whistled through the air, struck Helios's thigh. Boom! The titans staggered, not much, but enough. They clashed, forge god and flame tyrant. Light against will. The crucible became a storm. Pillars cracked, fire turned inward. Chains groaned. Helios struck with light. Hephaestus answered with metal. Clang, clang, clang. Every time the hammer landed, it sang. Not a song of gods, a worker's song, one made from years of silence and ash, the song of someone no one remembered, except the metal, and the metal began to respond. The crucible groaned. The chains snapped, one by one. Chapter 4. Anvil Heart. Ascending Helios screamed, and the crucible screamed with him. His solar flesh cracked, light leaking like blood. He twisted, eyes burning twin infernos. You think you deserve this? He bellowed, voice splintering marble. You think the forge is yours to claim? You were cast out for a reason. Hephaestus didn't answer with words. He drove Anvil Heart into the center of the crucible. The entire structure shuddered. Reality rippled. The flame at the heart of the forge, the sun core, the primal fire Helios had bound eons ago, opened its eyes. It didn't care for him. It remembered before him. It saw Hephaestus not as a mistake, but as a mirror. Broken, yes. Twisted, yes, but true. He had built himself without divine help. Fire had not been given to him. It had been dragged from the bones of the earth. And so, the sun core chose. Helios lunged for it, but he was too late. The flame surged into Hephaestus, down his throat, into his veins, into the runes carved in his bones. He screamed, but did not fall. The fire seared through his twisted leg, melting the iron and sinew, remaking it. His flesh burned away, leaving divine alloy. He rose, glowing, dripping molten tears. His voice returned, not meek, not broken, but the sound of hammer on anvil. Helios faltered. Impossible, he rasped. You are scrap. You are nothing. No, Hephaestus said, raising the hammer one last time. I am the forge. The final blow split the crucible. Light erupted, white, then red, then silent. When it faded, Helios was gone. Not slain. Unmade. His armor scattered like husk char across Olympus. His throne melted. His name whispered only by the dying. And in his place, atop a new anvil wrought from the crucible's core, stood Hephaestus, not as god of scraps, not as broken sun, as the god of the forge. She died between a heartbeat and a breath, and Orpheus, the man who could sing trees into bloom, decided the grave was not enough to keep her. The song that broke the dead. Chapter: The wedding and the wound. They say the gods wept at their wedding. Even Apollo paused the sun. Even Artemis laid down her bow. For that day, in the grove thick with olives and laurel, Orpheus sang the world into stillness. And Eurydice, wild-eyed and barefooted, laughed like the sky had never known thunder. He played a song that made flowers open midwinter, one that made bees sleep on still air. It was not joy he sang, but certainty. That this and this union, this love, was not a promise, it was a truth, a new law written in sound. But the gods don't love certainty. They love stories, and stories must bend. She stepped on a serpent, just a breath later, running barefoot through tall grass, her veil catching sun, a hiss, a cry, a silence. She died before the echo stopped. Orpheus found her body cold and kissed her eyes until his lips bled. He screamed her name until birds fell from the sky. And when he picked up his lyre again, the sound had changed. It was no longer music. It was grief given shape. His strings tore clouds in half. His melodies cracked marble. He played a song that made shepherds abandon their flocks and priests forget the names of their gods. The world listened and broke a little. No one could speak to him. Not his mother, not his friends. He refused food, refused sleep. He played. One day, he stood at the mouth of a cave, the one they called a throat to the underworld. The wind from within smelled like rot and memory. He tuned his lyre and stepped inside. He did not ask permission. He did not pray. He walked downward, downward, downward still, until the world forgot light. They say mortals cannot enter the land of the dead. But Orpheus was no longer mortal, not truly. He was made of song and hunger. And the underworld, cold, endless, deaf, heard him coming. Chapter 2. The Descent, with narration tags. The path beneath the earth did not welcome him. There were no signs, no torches, no turning back, just a slope of broken bone and black stone, and the stench of memory too old to name. Orpheus walked barefoot. He did not flinch. He did not pause. His lyre was clutched to his chest like a wound. His fingers bled against the strings, and still he played. With each note, the world around him shifted. Rocks wept moss, the shadows pulsed, the dead stirred. The river Styx was the first to notice. It hissed and seethed, full of teeth and regrets. Its waters did not reflect the living. They reflected only what had been lost. When Orpheus stepped to the shore, he said quietly, "Take me across." Charon, the ferryman, rose from the mist, eyes hollow, mouth stitched shut by centuries. He did not speak. He never did. Still, Orpheus played. A lullaby no one should remember, soft as dust. And Charon trembled. He lowered the boat in silence. Across the Styx they drifted, past shapes half-formed, souls too thin to stand. They reached for Orpheus, not to stop him, but to feel him, to remember the living one last time. He said nothing. He played only for one. At the gate, Cerberus waited, the great three-headed hound of Hades. One head slept, one growled, one wept blood. It rose, towering and tense, baring its teeth. But Orpheus didn't falter. He stepped forward and whispered, "This is not for you." Then he played. The music hung like incense, a note that trembled with sorrow, too deep to bite. Cerberus bowed its heads, then lay at his feet and whimpered. Then came the throne. The palace of Hades was no fortress, just emptiness carved into shape. Black marble drank the torchlight. Columns loomed like old gods waiting to be remembered. At its heart, 2 thrones. Hades, god of the underworld, spine straight, eyes fathomless. Persephone, still as bone, crowned in wilted petals. They did not speak. They simply watched. Orpheus stood before them, nothing but a man with a lyre and a name. He bowed his head, then said, "I come for Eurydice." He did not beg. He did not kneel. Instead he played, and the song was silence made sound, a lament for those left behind, a requiem for every scream that went unanswered, a prayer without words, sung into the bones of the world. He sang her name, Eurydice, software sharp, sacred. He said it like it could bring her back. Persephone wept, 1 tear, that was all. Hades closed his eyes. When the music ended, he spoke, his voice low and final. "She may follow you," said Hades, "but you must not look back. Not once. Not for grief, not for doubt, not even for love." Orpheus nodded. "I understand," he said. He turned. He did not ask how far. He did not ask how long. He simply stepped forward, and behind him he heard nothing. No footstep. No breath. Only the vast hush of death itself. Chapter 3. The silence and the turning. The silence followed him like a ghost. It clung to his back. It pooled in his ears. It whispered in the rhythm of his steps. And Orpheus walked, 1 foot, then the next. The path behind him, hidden, the one he loved, unseen. Each step was a question. Is she still there? Is she following? Is she real? He didn't speak these questions. He didn't dare. But the silence answered anyway, with more silence. The tunnel twisted, time bent. He walked for what could have been minutes or 100 years. His hands trembled on the lyre. He did not play. The rule was clear. Not a sound. Not a look. Not until sunlight touched them both. The underworld changed the deeper he climbed. The stone grew damp. The shadows more solid. Echoes started to return, but not his own. He heard footsteps that matched his, then paused when he paused. He heard a breath that wasn't his. He heard her voice, once, soft, behind him. "I'm here," said Eurydice. But she wasn't allowed to speak, and he wasn't allowed to turn. He bit his tongue. Blood filled his mouth. He kept walking. And then, another voice, not hers. Lower, cruel. It said, "She never followed you. You walked alone." Orpheus flinched. "No," he whispered to himself. "She's behind me. She has to be." The path narrowed. He stumbled. Rocks bit at his feet. The darkness didn't care. "You sang for nothing," the voice said. "You sang to an empty room. You believed a god." He clenched his fists. The lyre groaned in his grip. He said nothing, but the silence kept pushing, pulling, gnawing at his certainty like worms in wood. What if they lied to you? What if she never rose? What if she's just a shadow now? What if you turn back now, just to make sure? His breath caught. He could feel her. He swore he could, but silence is a cruel mirror, and faith is a blade. The passage narrowed again. A shaft of pale light stretched ahead, not warm, but real. The surface. He was close, so close, and yet his heart screamed. What if it was all a trick? What if they were punishing him? What if this whole journey had been for nothing? He stopped walking. The silence pressed against him, thick and cold. "Eurydice," he whispered, knowing he shouldn't. No reply. "Please," he said, tears biting his throat. "Just let me hear you." A footstep, behind him, so faint he wasn't sure it had ever been real. His hands shook, his knees buckled. He turned, and there she was, Eurydice, pale, beautiful, real. Her eyes wide with horror, her mouth open to scream. But before she could say anything, her body unraveled, like smoke in reverse, like memory erasing itself. Her hand reached out, but dissolved before she touched him. Her lips moved. "Why?" she mouthed. Then she was gone. Orpheus screamed, but the underworld didn't echo it. It swallowed it whole. He stood at the edge of light, alone. His fingers broke the strings of the lyre. He dropped it. It didn't shatter. It simply stopped being needed. He did not cry. He walked the rest of the way in silence. Not because he had to, but because he didn't know how to make a sound anymore. Chapter 4. The Ash and the Echo. Orpheus left the underworld in silence. No one stopped him. No one chased him. Even the shadows looked away. The gate closed behind him with a sound like forgetting. He walked barefoot into the land of the living. But he was not part of it anymore. His hair was grey, his eyes hollowed, his hands no longer fit for strings. The sun touched his face, but he didn't lift his head. The lyre was still on his back. Useless. Quiet. He never played again. Villagers saw him wander through fields, past temples, through cities. He did not speak. He did not sing. And so, people told stories. "That's the man who sang to death," they said. "The one who lost her twice." "Don't look him in the eyes," someone whispered. "There's nothing left in there." They weren't wrong. Orpheus began to avoid the living. He slept in ruins, spoke to rivers. Sometimes he would hum, not melodies, just notes. Flat, bare, like he was testing whether the world could still feel him. It couldn't. One night, he returned to the grove where they had wed. The flowers were gone. The altar collapsed. The tree where they'd kissed now bent under its own weight. He sat beneath it, closed his eyes, and whispered her name. "Eurydice," he said, almost too soft to hear. No echo answered, not even the wind. There are many versions of how he died. Some say he was torn apart by wild women who hated his silence. Others say animals found him singing to bones and mistook him for prey. But none of that matters, because Orpheus was already dead. When the end came, it was quiet. The kind of quiet you find in the space between stars. They found his body by the river, face peaceful, hands curled like they still cradled the lyre. The strings were gone, plucked by time, by grief, by gods. His eyes were closed, but some say he was smiling. They buried him in that grove. The earth drank deep, and from it wildflowers bloomed that never grew anywhere else. Soft, purple, fragrant. People called them morning blooms. They say if you press your ear to the soil on a still night, you can hear a single note. Not a song, not a melody. Just one eternal chord. The last note of a man who sang too far. But even that note fades, eventually. Even gods forget. Even stories fall quiet. Except this one. Because every time someone speaks his name, Orpheus, the song stirs again. Not in the world, but in us. In the part that believes we can still reach into the dark and pull back something lost. They mocked him as a drunk. They named him false. But Dionysus didn't need belief, just an invitation. The God Who Burns the Mask. Chapter 1. The God in the Dust. He came barefoot, cloaked in dust and silence, with a crown of ivy on his brow. and laughter in his teeth. Yet not a soul in Thebes knew. They had already begun to die. He walked the low roads at dusk, where the stones bled heat and the shadows stretched like fingers. No trumpet heralded him, no priests welcomed him. The gates stayed shut. Just another vagabond, another drifter with dirt on his skin and wine on his breath. They didn't see the vines curling behind his feet, didn't notice the birds turning their heads to follow him. They saw only a man, and men, Thebes believed, could be broken. He found his flock outside the walls, in the forgotten places, widows, dancers, mad women, slaves who remembered freedom only in dreams. They knelt in the dirt, laughing without reason, weeping wine from their eyes as he spoke, a voice too quiet for thunder, too deep for silence. The world is a lie dressed in stone. I have come to shatter the dressing. He poured wine into cracked cups, whispered names only the wind remembered, touched their foreheads. And they remembered who they had once been, not obedient, not shameful, not small, but divine. Inside the city, King Pentheus heard whispers. They called it a cult, a drunken rabble, women pretending at power, men who wept in public. His court laughed, but Pentheus did not. He felt it in his teeth, a wrongness, a tremor beneath the marble. The name Dionysus crawled through the palace like ivy. Some foreign sorcerer, the priest said, another charlatan. Still, he ordered the guards to burn the camps. By morning, the camps were gone, but the guards returned, smiling, clothes stained with wine, voices full of songs they didn't remember learning. Pentheus struck one of them, hard. The man thanked him, eyes gleaming like dawn. On the second night, the fountains ran red, not with blood, but wine, Merlot. The temple goats danced in circles. A child was born mid-dusk and spoke fluent poetry in Dionysus' name. Thebes didn't know what to do with this kind of plague. Dionysus climbed the hill outside the city. His followers spun behind him, masked, wild, mouths full of laughter and teeth. Some wore skins, some wore nothing, but all of them wore freedom. He turned to them, arms wide. Let the city call us madness, let it call us disease. We are the truth that grows through the cracks. And when he looked down on Thebes, marble glinting cold beneath the moon, he smiled. The play had begun. Chapter 2. The Man Who Would Not Bow. In the throne room of Thebes, King Pentheus ruled with a hand carved from marble. He believed in order, in legacy, in silence. So, when the name Dionysus first reached his ears, he dismissed it like smoke. A foreigner, a madman. The stories of masked women, wild rites, drunken dances were beneath him. But the name returned, again and again, always with more whispers. Servants failed to answer when called. Scribes wrote poetry instead of records. A senator tore off his robes mid-session and fled the city. Each time, Pentheus repeated the same word: fraud. He sent soldiers to arrest the so-called prophet. None returned in chains. One came back singing. One came back naked. One came back with vines growing from his sleeves. Pentheus struck the last in front of the court. The soldier bled and smiled. He's already inside, he said. That night, Pentheus banned all worship of Dionysus, all gatherings, all masks. He poured wine onto the temple steps, burned the ivy from his gates. But ivy grows back, and by morning it had returned, stronger. The high priest warned him. He is no mortal. His name is older than ours. Pentheus threatened exile. I will not be ruled by illusion, he said. But when Dionysus appeared at his court, he was no illusion. He came barefoot, robed simply, unarmed, beautiful in a way that disarmed. Not soft, not cruel, just inevitable. Pentheus called him a coward, a pretender, demanded he confess. Dionysus smiled. I confess nothing. But if you wish to see what I am, wear the mask. Come to the hills. The king narrowed his eyes. You want me to dance? I want you to understand. He handed Pentheus a veil, ivory white, soft as air. It smelled faintly of honey and ash. The king held it, unimpressed. A trick. No, said Dionysus, a revelation. And so the king agreed, to follow, to spy, to wear the mask and witness the rites for himself. Dionysus turned away, already smiling, already knowing. The mask wasn't the disguise. The mask was the truth. Chapter 3. The Mask and the Mirror. They dressed him in a woman's robe, not silk, not embroidered, nothing noble, just soft linen, loose at the shoulders, dyed with crushed berries and sweat. A veil over his face, bangles at his wrists, a sash that made him look slender, shapeless, harmless. King Pentheus, ruler of Thebes, war-born, bloodline of Cadmus, now hidden beneath the skin of a girl. And Dionysus watched him change. The god circled him like a tailor, adjusting folds, lifting the veil, smiling in that way that said, I've already seen you naked. You should sway more when you walk, Dionysus said gently. I do not sway, Pentheus snapped. You will. The mirror showed what Pentheus would not say aloud. In it, he saw himself, not as a king in disguise, but as something strangely beautiful. There was softness in his cheekbones, a curious glint in his eyes, a curve to his lip that was never allowed to form behind a crown, and he stared at himself far too long. I look ridiculous, he muttered. No, said Dionysus, you look free. He led the king through the city by side alleys and back walls. Thebes burned with tension. Guards lined the gates. Priests paced in silent fury. But no one recognized him. He was no longer Pentheus. He was someone they had never feared. The wild hills loomed ahead. Mount Cithaeron, where the Maenads danced. Pentheus clutched the hem of his robe. He felt naked, but also untethered. Dionysus moved like breath, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, sometimes gone for minutes, then reappearing from trees with a vine-draped smile. He never spoke too loudly, never touched the king, only watched, as Pentheus slowly forgot to pretend. By dusk, they reached the edge of the rites. Pentheus crouched in the brush, veiled and trembling. What he saw was not chaos. It was ritual. The Maenads, women he had once called mad, prostitutes, rebels, slaves, moved like stars across a dark sky. They danced in wide circles. Snakes wrapped around their arms, hissing in harmony. Their feet made thunder on the mountain. Their voices wove into song. It was terrifying and magnificent. One woman cupped wine from a broken stone, poured it over her head. Another howled, and her cry broke into laughter so raw it tore the air. A third stared straight at Pentheus, though she could not see him through the thicket. She smiled. The king's pulse hammered. He turned to Dionysus. I want to see more. I want to go closer. You will, the god whispered, but only if you lose the last of yourself. He reached forward, lifted the veil, and Pentheus stepped into the firelight. No one screamed. No one struck him. The Maenads welcomed him like a sister. They draped him in ivy, painted his lips red, called him by a name he did not know, but one that made his skin tingle when spoken. They danced with him, sang with him. He forgot why he'd come, forgot what he wore, forgot who he was. And Dionysus watched, not with cruelty, but with the patience of a god who always tells the truth, even if the truth kills. When the drums reached their peak and the moon carved fire across the sky, Pentheus threw his arms up and howled. His mouth opened, but it was not his voice that came out. It was something older, something buried. The Maenads howled back, and they began to circle. Chapter 4. The Dance in the Hills. The fire crackled in rhythms no mortal had written. Flames danced sideways, driven by drum beats that had no source. The moon hung too low, too large, like it had crept closer just to see the end of a lie. And Pentheus, the king, no longer stood like a man. He moved like a shadow stitched into ecstasy. The Maenads sang his name, not Pentheus, but the name Dionysus had whispered into the roots of his mind. The name he would never speak again. The one that opened him. He wore no crown now, only ivy, only joy. Around him, the world had broken its mask. Wine poured from the bark of trees. Animals walked backward. A doe spoke a riddle in a dead language. The wind itself laughed. None of it disturbed him. He laughed too. Dionysus stood at the edge of it all, arms folded, head tilted, watching as his godhood unfolded in others. He had not come to destroy Pentheus. He had come to free him. And what was freedom, if not the end of pretending? Pentheus danced, and he was beautiful in it. For a moment, he wasn't a king. He wasn't a man. He was what Dionysus had always been, the undoing of cages. But no mortal can stay in ecstasy forever. The mask always slips. Even the divine cannot grant permanent unselfing. There must be a reckoning. It began with a single Maenad, eyes wide, face blank. She stopped dancing. She stared at him, head tilting slowly. Then another stopped, then two more. The circle closed in, but this was not love, not anymore. "He's not one of us," someone whispered. "He stinks of marble," another hissed. "Too clean, too shaped, too controlled." Pentheus backed away. "I know, He stumbled. The veil slipped from his head. They saw the truth. Not their sister, not their priestess, but a spy, a man, a king. The singing stopped, the fire dimmed, and Dionysus stepped forward, calm, hands still empty. "You wanted to see," he said, voice soft as wine spilled in moonlight. "Now you see." Pentheus turned, tried to run, but the Maenads caught him. They moved as one, hands like claws, voices high and trembling. Tears streamed down their cheeks as they tore at him. Not from hate, but from frenzy, from divine possession, from joy. His cries didn't sound like royalty. They sounded like a man falling through everything he had ever built. At the center of them all, Agave danced. She had not known she was his mother. Not then. She only knew she had found prey. Her hands were soaked in red when she raised his head above the flames. His eyes still wide, his mouth open like a broken door. And she smiled. Dionysus watched. Not cold, not triumphant, just true. He had promised vision, and he had delivered. The wind lifted, the moon blinked, and the drums fell silent. By morning, there would be nothing left of the king but torn silk, a mask in the dirt, and a question hanging in the air. What happens when the lie dies and the god is real? Chapter 5. The rending. The sun rose slow and gold, as if the sky itself hesitated to witness what had been done in the dark. The mountain steamed with silence, and from its slope Agave descended, barefoot, blood-slicked, smiling. She walked like a queen from legend, thorns in her hair, vine cuts across her arms, her eyes alight with holy fever. She carried the head with both hands, held high as an offering. The face was ruined, cheeks torn, lips split, but the jaw was still sharp, the eyes still half open. To her, it looked like a lion. She laughed. "See what I've done," she whispered. "See the beast I've slain for you." Behind her, the Maenads followed, silent now, smeared with proof. The song gone from their lips. The joy had fled and left only ritual. Thebes met her at the gate. First stares, then gasps, then screams. Her sisters fell to their knees. The guards could not look at her. Only one man approached. Old, bent, cloaked in mourning grey. Cadmus, father, founding king, and now, a man shattered by the gods. "Agave," he said, voice cracking. "Daughter." She laughed, held out the head like a trophy. "Do you see it, father? The lion, I tore him down myself." Cadmus looked, trembled. "No, child," he whispered. "No, look again." He reached for her hand. Slow, gentle. He tilted the head. The light struck it different now. The eyes, human. The mouth, familiar. The hair, her own son's. Pentheus. Agave's smile cracked. Her breath hitched. The madness peeled like bark. She dropped the head. It hit the stones with a sound that split her soul in half. "No," she said. Number no." She looked at her hands, stared at the blood under her nails, and screamed. Dionysus stood nearby, no longer in disguise. He wore the god skin now, golden, terrible, eyes like flame under still water. "You would not see me," he said, "so I made you see yourselves." Cadmus fell to his knees. "I believed, Lord, I did. Long ago." "You did," said Dionysus, "and then you forgot." He looked at Agave. "You called me false. You spat on my rights. You mocked my name." She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. There was no excuse, only the truth. And the truth was too much to live with. Dionysus turned away. "I am not cruel," he said. "I am not wrathful. I am only real." Thebes did not burn. Thebes was not struck down by lightning or war. Thebes was left awake, sober, ruined. The people had danced, and now they had to remember what it cost. The god walked the streets once more. No one stopped him now. He passed the palace, past the temple, past the place where Pentheus once sat, and past judgment. No one bowed. No one moved. They only watched, and where his feet touched stone, ivy grew. Chapter 6. The God revealed. There were no horns, no thunder, no divine scream to mark the end, only silence. The kind of silence that follows a scream too long held. Dionysus stood on the steps of the palace, the same stone Pentheus had stood on. Once. The same platform where laws had been shouted, where men had bowed, where masks of order had ruled. Now, the god stood there, unmasked, no veil, no robe, no pretense of mortality. He wore a crown of vine and snake. His skin shimmered like dusk on water. His eyes held no end, just depth. Thebes gathered slowly, like survivors creeping into a crater. They had danced. They had seen. They had lost the lie. And now they looked upon what had always been there. A god not made of thunder, but of vision. Not crowned by lightning, but by what you become when the mask falls away and the truth walks in your skin. Agave remained in her house, veiled in ash. She spoke to no one, only wept. Cadmus dressed in black and wandered the ruins of his bloodline, hands brushing stone that once knew music. He did not beg for mercy. He knew he'd been given too much already. And Dionysus. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He did not punish further. He simply spoke. You looked at ecstasy and saw sin. You looked at freedom and saw infection. You looked at me and saw only a boy with no crown. His voice rang like a bell made of honey and bone. So I gave you what you wanted. Madness, confusion, the end of the mirror. He stepped down from the steps. The crowd parted. Some fell to their knees. Others bowed their heads. A few looked up and saw, not the god of wine, not the god of excess, not the madman, but the truth, the terrible, sacred truth that joy and horror can wear the same face. Dionysus walked past them. Where he stepped, flowers grew, vines curled, statues cracked open and wept wine. He passed a child who touched his foot. The child did not cry. The child laughed, then stared at his own hands in wonder like they had just been born new. Outside the city, the mountain still pulsed with song, faint, like a heartbeat too slow to be human. The god looked back once and spoke his last words to Thebes. You will not forget me, not because of what I did, but because of what you became when you looked at me. Then he walked into the hills, back into myth, back into story, leaving Thebes broken, not by punishment, but by clarity. And the people, they rebuilt, but slower, quieter, with vines now grown deliberately into every wall. And once a year, when the moon hung too low, they wore masks again, not to hide, but to remember. This is not a love story. It's a descent, a coronation, a war between spring and shadow, and the girl who made herself a god, queen of ash and seed. Chapter 1. The last spring. They called her Kor, the maiden, daughter of Demeter, child of eternal spring. She wore her name like a veil, soft, clean, untouched. And under it, no one noticed she was already changing. The meadow bloomed around her bare feet. Where she stepped, the flowers turned toward her. Crocus, iris, hyacinth, all delicate, all obedient. Birds sang when she passed. Even the breeze bent around her like a worshipper. But Persephone, for that was her true name, the name she whispered only to herself, was already bored. I'm not a child, she said one morning, plucking a red poppy from the grass. She crushed it between her fingers until the petals bled. Demeter looked up sharply. No blood red, she said. Not in your hands. The gods will see it. Persephone said nothing. She let the petals fall. That night, the grass beneath her bed blackened in a perfect circle. The seasons were not seasons then. There was no winter, no dying, no cycle. Just forever spring, a mother's gift to the world. A world she refused to let her daughter leave. Don't stray beyond the olive trees, Demeter said. There are things beneath the hills that smell what you are. Persephone rolled her eyes. I'm not made of sunlight, she said. I'm not soft. You are mine, Demeter snapped, and the ground trembled beneath her. But Persephone had already turned away, and the next morning she walked beyond the trees. The valley fell quiet as she passed its edge. No birds, no wind, only the hum, low, faint, like the sound of something breathing beneath the soil. She knelt by a patch of pomegranate trees, twisted and out of season. The fruit hung heavy, skin dark as wine. They don't grow here, she whispered. Then a voice replied, No, but you do. She stood, startled. He was there, not a breath away. Hades, king of the underworld, but not how the poets wrote him. No horns, no chains, no flames, just black robes, eyes like polished obsidian, and a crown made of dead branches and gold. You've been watching me, Persephone said. He nodded once. Since the moment you wanted something your mother would not give. His voice was calm, low, the kind that didn't echo, because the world was already listening. I'm not afraid of you, she said. He smiled faintly. I would be disappointed if you were, Hades said. They stood in silence. The grass didn't grow beneath him. Even the light bent around his shape. Persephone stepped closer. "You came to take me," she said. Hades shook his head. "No," he said. "I came because you asked." She stared at him, then at the trees, the pomegranates, the shadow. Her voice was quiet now. "What happens if I go with you?" she asked. His answer was slower than before. He said, "You will become what they fear, and what you fear. You will become real." And then, he didn't reach for her. He knelt, held out his hand, palm up, open. No chains, no force, just a question. Behind her, the sun hung golden over the fields. Eternal, safe, expected. Ahead, nothing but shadow, and silence, and power. She took his hand. The earth split, the sky screamed, and Persephone descended, not as a prisoner, as a decision. Chapter 2. The Throne of Dust. The descent was not instant. The ground did not swallow her whole. It opened slowly, deliberately, like a mouth that had been waiting centuries to speak. Persephone held Hades' hand. Not tightly, not like prey. She held it like an anchor and stepped through the break in the world. The light died above them. One breath, then none, and all that remained was the sound of her own heartbeat and the deep, steady silence of the dead. The path beneath her feet shifted. Stone became bone, then ash, then a floor carved from obsidian so black it showed her reflection walking just beneath her. Not core, not the girl, but something sharper. They reached the gate. It was not made of iron or gold. It was made of memory, every lost moment woven into one great black arch. And standing before it was a shape with no face, no name, only a voice. "Do you come by death?" it asked. Hades replied, "No." "By conquest?" "No," he said again. Then he looked at her. "By choice?" the gate asked. Persephone spoke. "Yes," she said. The gate opened, and the underworld exhaled. The realm beyond was vast, not cold, not hell, not a prison. It was silence made sacred. Stone towers, rivers of ink, gardens where ghost flowers bloomed in moonless night, ruins older than Olympus. The dead moved slowly through the city of shadows. They did not wail, they did not plead, they simply were. The spirits bowed as she passed, not to Hades, to her. He led her to the palace, not a temple, not a throne of blood, just a hall carved into the roots of the world. No servants, no fanfare, just a room with a chair made of petrified wood and bone-white marble. It sat beside his, but it was empty. "This is yours," Hades said. Persephone looked at it, then back at him. "I haven't earned it," she said. He stepped aside, quietly, gently. "Then build it," he replied. She did not sit. Not yet. Instead, she wandered the halls, spoke with the dead, touched the rivers. She planted seeds in soil no one believed could grow. And the underworld changed. Where she walked, things bloomed, not with colour, but with purpose. Spirits long silent began to speak again. The rivers cleared. Even Cerberus, the three-headed hound, came to rest at her feet. "She is not a guest," Hades told the shades. "She is not a prisoner." He looked to Persephone. She is what this realm has not had in an age. A balance, not death, not life, something between. And one evening, beneath a sky of stone, she stood before the throne again. The same petrified chair, and this time she sat. It did not groan beneath her. It did not resist her. It accepted her, because she was no longer just a daughter of spring, no longer the untouched girl in the field. She was Persephone, queen of the underworld, and the roots of her throne ran straight through the heart of the world above. Chapter 3. The Withering. The earth cracked when Persephone sat the throne. It didn't roar. It didn't tremble. It simply stopped. The crops failed first. Then the rivers slowed. Then the wind forgot where to blow. In the mortal realm, the farmers looked to the skies. No answer. The priests offered sacrifices. The altars stayed cold, and in the high places of Olympus, Demeter screamed. She was taken, Demeter said. She was dragged below. But no one moved. Zeus avoided her eyes. Apollo said nothing. Hera only folded her arms. Hermes, ever the careful one, finally whispered, "She went willingly." Demeter's voice shook the marble beneath them. "She's a child," she said. "She doesn't know what she's become." But the truth had already taken root. Persephone had not been stolen. She had chosen. And that truth scorched Demeter more than fire. She tore the temples down. She turned fields to salt. She refused the world her gift. "If my daughter will reign beneath," Demeter said, "then the world above will learn hunger." Winter came. For the first time. Mortals froze in their beds. Animals starved. Even the sun dimmed at the edge of its path. They cried to the gods, to Demeter, to Hades, to Persephone. But only one answered. Beneath the world, in her throne of stone and bone, Persephone listened. Not with her ears, but with the roots she'd sown into the soul of the land. She felt the dying, felt the sorrow, felt her mother's grief like ash under her fingernails. And still, she did not rise. Hades approached her one night. The river of Lethe whispered behind him. His crown glinted dull in the dark. "She will not stop," he said. "She will burn the world." Persephone looked down at her hands. Soil clung to her palms. Black, fertile. "She wants me to be a child again," Persephone said. "She wants the girl who only knew flowers." "And what do you want?" Hades asked. She didn't answer immediately. Then, "To be more than a season." Above, Demeter roamed the hills barefoot, hair unbound, face streaked with fury and frost. She clawed at the sky, and the sky turned its face, and the mortals wept. Not for her, for themselves, because in the fight between gods, it is always the humans who break first. Persephone rose from her throne. She did not cry. She walked to the roots she had planted, bent to the ground, pressed her hands into the earth, and it breathed. Not forgiveness, not surrender, but rhythm. She would return. For them, not for her mother. In the dead of night, Persephone whispered, "Tell her I'll come." Hades turned, surprised, then nodded. "On one condition," Persephone added. "Half the year I stay, the other half I rule." He looked at her, and for the first time since the beginning of time, the king of the dead smiled. "Then let it be," he said. Hermes flew like fire to the surface. Demeter stood in a field of frost and bones. When he spoke, he said, "She comes back." But not as core. And Demeter, still raging, still raw, fell to her knees, because she knew the truth. Her daughter had eaten the pomegranate, not in ignorance, in oath. And no flower would ever bloom again, without Persephone's name beneath it. Chapter 4. Queen of both worlds. Not because Demeter forgave, but because Persephone had returned. The first sprout pushed through frost-bitten ground. The wind remembered how to warm. The sun, hesitant, climbed back into the sky. But everything it touched had changed. She did not come back in silence, not hidden in mist or shame. Persephone rose from the underworld, crowned, not with flowers, but with iron blossoms, with vines twisted from bone, with petals blackened at the edge like burned parchment, and the mortals who saw her, they knelt, not because she was bright, but because she was true. Demeter met her on the edge of the meadow where it all began. The sky bloomed gold behind her. The field stood silent. "You came back," Demeter said, voice raw. Persephone studied her. "I never left," she replied. Demeter stepped forward. "My daughter," she began, but Persephone raised her hand. "No," she said, "I am not only your daughter." Demeter froze. Persephone stepped closer. "I am not Kor." She held her hand out to the ground. Flowers sprang from her fingertips, but not the ones Demeter had given her. These were dark-stemmed, midnight blossoms, half alive, half sleeping, the kind that only bloom after loss. "For half the year," Persephone said, "I will walk these fields. I will bring growth. I will bring bloom." She turned her gaze upward. "But for the other half," she said, "I return to my throne." Demeter's lip trembled. "You belong in the sun," she whispered. "No," Persephone said, "I belong where life and death meet." There were no thunderclaps, no lightning, just the sound of soil accepting its terms. The seasons bent around her. Winter nodded, spring exhaled, and from that moment on, time had rhythm. Not eternal bloom, not endless decay, but balance. She walked the world like a queen, but the wind still whispered her old name. Kor. She did not answer it, not because she hated it, but because it no longer fit. When she returned below, the shades greeted her with bowed heads. The roots parted for her feet. Hades waited, not as ruler over her, but as equal. He offered her his arm. She did not take it. She walked beside him. Together, they ruled the quiet. Not with fire, not with chains, but with a pact older than Olympus, that nothing stays, nothing lasts, everything returns, and every end is the beginning of something buried just beneath the surface. They say that every year, when Persephone walks upward, flowers bloom too early. And every time she descends, a chill wraps the trees, as if the earth itself mourns her absence. But it is not grief. It is reverence. Because they know she chose both. And gods do not fear death. They walk with it.